I just think this team needs a new voice. I just they are not responsive right now. They have no identity. You watch a Cardinal game every Sunday, looks the same from a losing standpoint, but nothing that they do well they can build on. And so that's disappointing. Last year at this time, you talk about him going to Seattle and winning in San Francisco.
They're 5-14 over the last 19 games.
Guys, don't be surprised.
It's a production business.
Don't be surprised if there's a GM change, but there's no head coaching change.
Well, I know we've talked about it ad nauseum. This was from Benjamin Albright on Twitter. He's pretty tapped in. I've had a chance to interview Benjamin in the past. We're hoping to connect with him at the NFL Combine. Getting asked, do you think Kliff Kingsbury gets the axe? He says, seems likely at this point with the Keim situation, it's an opportunity, and Bo, you've used that word, to reset an organization that probably needs it. Absolutely. Why do you want to carry over baggage from the last regime? You don't. And so I think that to give everybody a clean slate, I mean, goodness, they could win a game in the final three, but if they don't, they'll be 4-13. And these last couple games could look really bad, especially if Trace McSorley's playing.
And guys, only reason why I say that it's going to be a unique situation in finding a head coach that can, just vibe with Kyler Murray's skill set, because everyone doesn't have that ability, right, to come in and adapt like they did with Lamar Jackson. Every offensive coordinator doesn't have that mind where they think that everyone's supposed to be more like Justin Herbert, right? 6'5", 6'2 plus, and have the ability of a hand cannon and has some athletic ability, but what is most known for standing in the pocket and delivering the ball on timing routes. Kyler Murray is a unique player in that you have to be creative, although that he can create, but you have to be creative in ways that you can highlight his athletic ability. And I think that that's going to be it's just going to take a unique coach. Not that Kliff isn't or is getting the job done. I would just say up to this point, every year you're evaluated. It's what have you done for me lately? And it hasn't been much. So I understand the discourse and the conversations relating to, him staying as a head coach. However, I just know, guys, that given Kyler Murray's skill set, given the athletes, I think it's, the athletes that they have around him, I think that it's a sexy, offer. However, once you take a step back, you have to really think about how can I highlight this kid's ability, and am I the right guy to do that? And I think Michael and company, whoever that GM is, going to have to make a really, tough decision trying to evaluate who is the right guy to highlight Kyler's abilities.
Yeah, and I think Kyler remains, a selling piece, a piece that will sell out coaches on this organization. I think that I still believe that. But as far as the rest of it, the points that Carson Palmer was making on, was it the 33rd team? He joined Trey Wingo and was saying that, all the dysfunction is going to, just pretty much tell any GM candidate or head coach candidate that they shouldn't touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I apologize.
Correct.
Wholeheartedly disagree with that. As far as, this team in 2019, yes, that was true. I mean, they were one and done. The roster was in shambles. They were, they didn't have a quarterback. 2018 was probably a little bit better, but not great. They still didn't have a quarterback at that time. 2013, when they went for BA, they didn't have a quarterback. They have a quarterback now. That's a big part of this. But look, the biggest part here is Michael Bidwell, the owner, can't waffle on any more of these decisions. Like, Steve Keim has to be done. Done. Like, there has to be no question of whether or not he can come back into this organization in any capacity. Like, he has to move off of Steve Keim. That has to be he has to be convicted in that. He has to move forward, because if he does, if he walks back a little bit, people will see that and like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. But if he moves off of it and he gets a new Steve Keim successor, a new GM in there, this organization slowly, there's a couple more things they have to do, but gets back into the realm of appealing to potential head coach candidates.
And like, how quickly we forget too. San Francisco, after they had the falling out with Jim Harbaugh, had Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly, and everybody thought Jed York was a fucking buffoon. Yeah. And they said nobody touched San Francisco. Kaepernick flamed out, depending on who you ask. That franchise was in disarray, and they ended up being able to secure Kyle Shanahan. Why?
Because it's still like a heritage franchise, though. I mean, it's like one of the big.
But they wrote a big check, and they said, Kyle, pick your GM, and you're going to be able to implement your scheme and do what you want to do here. Now, I get it. It's a bigger market, bigger selling point, but like, they were considered semi-toxic. They had gone from 3 coaches in 3 years.
Yeah.
Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly were both fired in like an 18-month span or 24-month span, and Harbaugh had bailed on them. So it's just, to me, it just depends on the time of year. This stuff is cyclical. Like the Cardinals, are they historically kind of a little bit dysfunctional? Sure, they haven't won a Super Bowl. But I mean, like, look at how we were perceiving Seattle last offseason. They were going to go into this lengthy rebuild, and they were a joke, and they had turned their back on Russell Wilson. And then they rallied around that, and they said, no, let us prove you wrong. Michael hires the right people. All this is just outside noise. But that's assuming, ladies and gentlemen, that he fires Kliff Kingsbury. And speaking of fired head coaches, I want to show you what we believe could be trending toward potential NFL coaching changes and how that could affect the Cardinals and their ability to add somebody else. So here are the projected vacancies right now for NFL head coaches as we get down to Black Monday on January 9th. Matter of time, I do believe. Well, we already have openings in both Carolina and Indianapolis. Anybody, I'm sorry for the Jeff Saturday fans in here. I don't think he's keeping that job. Despite winning on Sunday, Nathaniel Hackett, our friends at DMVR, it feels like that's, going to be a one and done. And then Kliff Kingsbury, say a hope and a prayer. If you hope Kliff Kingsbury is back, we'll see. But then you go down to trending that way. Houston Texans, number 1 pick. Could they move off of Lovie Smith? 50-50, I've heard. Dennis Allen. What's going on in New Orleans? They have no direction. They won this weekend, but they could easily be a 6-win team at the end of the year. And then our guy Todd Bowles in Tampa, that situation just does not look right, despite the fact that they're probably going to win the putrid NFC South. And then you look at the sleepers. Could Sean McVay take a year off, step away? What's going on with Arthur Smith? He's gotten to start Desmond Ridder. That has not looked good. Kevin Stefanski, right? I know they won this weekend, but they could pivot off of him. Bill Belichick, will he retire? And then the two at the end are the biggest wild cards, because I think this is really where the Sean Payton saga picks up. Can Brandon Staley win a playoff game? Is that going to be enough just getting to the playoffs? Same with Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys, they're going to the playoffs. But if they're one and done, does Jerry get impatient and fire him? So there are my tiers for the NFL vacant coaching rankings, potentially, maybe, sort of. Your thoughts on that, gentlemen? You like what you see?
I do. Yeah, I think he did a really good job on that. I mean, I don't disagree.
But you guys think that Wilkes will be gone in Carolina? Think it's a done deal?
No, but I think that
that ownership, the GM, it just seems like even when they have a good thing, sometimes it's not enough for them.
I think he could be kept as the DC, Damian.
They shoot from the hip way too often. I think Steve Wilkes has made his case, no doubt about it, and then some.
Right,
and
likewise,
absolutely deserves an interview and should be kind of, it's his job to lose depending on who the candidates are. But yeah, I mean, just the fact that he's in the interim, and we'll see. They're gonna probably open up the search and talk to some people, and we'll just kind of see what happens. But I think it's his to lose. But let's put that tier list back up, if you don't mind, Jacob. Just kind of look back at this and break it down a little bit more. And like, who are the true threats to the Arizona Cardinals as far as trying to get the best candidate available? I mean, and we know them, and they're in the sleeper tier, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say Dallas and Chargers for sure.
That's why I don't buy this bullshit that the Cardinals, this job is toxic and nobody wants it. Like, look at those other teams that are up there. Half of those teams don't have their first round pick.
Like, and when hasn't Dallas been toxic? Why don't people say that about Dallas? I mean, if you don't win, you're pretty much gone. And what control do you have when your owner is talking about every decision that's made, from his POV? I mean, like, I don't know if we've been dealing with it very similarly since Parcells was the coach,
right.
You know what I mean, of Dallas. Same issues, every year. Maybe the head coaches aren't as vocal, but Bo, to your point, I see the threats are the Chargers, Cowboys. I don't believe the Rams. I don't think anything's going to happen because I just think
unless he willingly walks away.
Fair, but I think they're too competitive for a guy that beat Megatron at Georgia Player of the Year. I don't see him just walking away, from a fight. But I think the two threats for the Arizona Cardinals for sure are the Rams and the Cowboys.
I think, in Kyler Murray, once again, he puts the Arizona Cardinals over the top, despite the fact that he could potentially miss time. And, the timelines were released and reported yesterday that are very ideal for the Arizona Cardinals. But I mean, Russ is the quarterback for the foreseeable future in Denver. Indy doesn't have one. Carolina doesn't have one. New Orleans doesn't have one. Houston doesn't have one. And Tampa could not have one, potentially, depending on what Tom Brady does. And if you're a head coach, do you want to go to that situation that Todd Bowles has been in this entire season? Do they feel like, okay, well, I know what was missing in Tampa and I can fix it? That might be, the chance to coach the GOAT. That might be something that gets in the
He's a free agent, Bo. But he's a free agent.
For sure.
He's going to want, $45 million?
Right.
So,
look at Cleveland. You want to coach Deshaun Watson and that shitstorm that's coming up? You
want
to follow
Cleveland.
That's not toxic. That's
right.
not toxic.
Right.
John.
Right.
You want to follow Bill Belichick? That
That's not
roster's in
toxic.
disarray. I mean, like, I thought it was important today, despite all this outside garbage and noise. Like, is it a rough time to be an Arizona Cardinal fan? Absolutely. But then look at that list and then just sit back and say, well, yeah, they should be pretty competitive for somebody to want to come take this over, especially you get to live in Phoenix. You get a fat check, right? Hopefully you're buddies with the GM and Michael Bidwell stays out of the way. You could be sitting here next year with Kyler Murray back and a team that's competing.
You could buy Kliff's house.
Maybe get a studio apartment to start. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Your family setup is, but
there are some things that you can do to fumble this. I mean, as far as the organization, the Cardinals organization. I mean, they are in the driver's seat. Like every offseason, there's a team that among the at the top of the shit heap it looks like the most appealing head coaching opening. Like, any head coach that's available is going to say that's where you want to go, right? Because they got the quarterback, they got a few stars, but it's going to come down to Michael Bidwell right now has to be creating these lists. He has to be, pretty much recruiting the Arizona Cardinals if he's made the decision to move off of Kliff Kingsbury. Because if you drag your feet, and you start letting some of these teams kind of get into the mix, I mean, the best thing they could do potentially is get a new coach in here before teams start getting knocked off and out of the playoffs, like by the divisional round or by the conference championship week. Because if you do that, teams like Dallas, teams like LA, I mean, we'll see if they survive, wild cards, and that's probably where, because realistically, if McCarthy goes to the divisional round and loses or Staley loses, I mean, that's where a potential head coach can be like, you make the playoffs and you're not even deemed successful. I don't want to go to that situation. It's a lose-lose. So.
And both of those divisions, it's crazy to say the NFC East and then certainly the AFC West are incredibly, incredibly competitive. Like Denver is going to try to get their shit together. And then you look at everything else going on in the NFC East with the fact that the Commanders are competitive without a quarterback. The Giants are just going to get better. I mean, Here's your selling point right now is you've got a division, the NFC West. Yeah, San Francisco is a juggernaut, but they don't have a quarterback of the future, we don't think. The Seahawks have really leveled out. I mean, if the Seahawks didn't sweep the Cardinals, and of course the Cardinals should have taken care of business, Seahawks are just kind of a footnote this year. They're under 500. They're barely 500 now. I think we've overvalued their talent. And then the Rams, the chickens are coming home to roost with the fact that they sold off all their picks. You've got an opportunity here, assuming Kyler Murray rebounds from this ACL, to have the best quarterback in the division with money to spend and draft picks to use. To me, if you just put all the other garbage aside and say, I trust the GM that I'm paired with, this is an opening that I can work with.